So there I am. Today, well, first of all, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm set up now. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thomas here, Nomads of Code. Today I will do a little bit of coding on a small exercise that is supposed to be used as an addendum to a blog post I wrote on Medium uh, about developing an API in Node.js, but also testing it. So let's see if we can find that blog post. Here are my blog posts, I guess. Let's see, profile, my post, stories. There we are. And we have API development cycle, Node.js, Express, SQLize, Mocha Chai, and a whole lot more. This is what I came up with. So let me see if I can I see the chat here somehow? No, I don't know if I can do this. Oh, there. Okay. So I can see the comments if there are any comments. So anyhow, let's see if we can get started with this. If you want to read the blog post, I will post a link in the description on YouTube, and yeah, so you can click on that. All right, let's get out of here. Let's see if we can open up the terminal. Here we are. Let's see. I am inside of other. I already had the terminal open, so I need to get out of this one. And I have projects, so I can just create a new folder, and I will call it API demo. All right, let's call it API demo. It is simply a demo. It's nothing else than a demo. And I'm gonna cd into this API demo. Okie dokie. And so what we want to do, and in the blog post I talk a lot about APIs and RESTful APIs and so on. I'm not gonna dwell on this now. You can, I think I can actually post a link. Can I post a link here? Yeah, I can post a link. No, I can't because I'm on a different computer. But anyway, I explain a lot about RESTful APIs and about test-driven development and so on and so forth. And I do encourage you guys to take a read of that if you are interested. Sorry. And I also talk about the suggested workflow that I usually employ when I develop, whether it's APIs, but also in a way a variant thereof when I work on front-end applications. And if you follow me, I know that you know that I do that sometimes. Now, the steps that we are talking about is, you define the different requirements for the API you will be, or for the system you will be developing, what sort of resources you want to use, what sort of endpoints you want to expose to the outside world, and the relationship thereof, of course, and if there are any entities, if you've got to work with database and so on. And then I start to write integration tests. That's my workflow. And this is, in my opinion, fairly important, and it kind of defines the test-driven way of doing things, right? And in this particular demo, not today, but in the second one, because this will be a multi-part stream. In this demo, we will be using an ORM called SQLize to access databases rather than using raw SQL. I find that much more efficient. It's a very large discussion and long discussion. There are pros and cons, of course, as with everything else. But So I will leave that discussion for the second part, but I just want you to know that that's what I want to use. Now, once my integration tests are in place ish, kind of, then they kind of tell me what I'm kind of want to do and want to achieve. Then I start to implement the actual API endpoints, the interface between the system that will be using my API and the inner workings of the application itself, right? So the way I see it, if you think about it, from an abstract perspective, the API endpoints are for other systems, like the user interfaces are for humans, right? That's the outer rim of the application itself. And so that's what I start with developing. That's the outside in. I start with the outer parts of the application and then work my way into the application. And if I have any models, like entities that or resources that will be used inside of my system, I start to write unit tests for that, and I implement them, of course, and I make sure that my tests are passing. And then, of course, we want to go on and refactor our implementation and perhaps expand the functionality, of course, with working with new tests and so on. Anyway, I explained this in more detail, but not too deep, in the blog post. If you're interested, go ahead and read it. Right, so what we will be using today is, of course, Node.js and ExpressJS. I don't think I mentioned it here. I don't know why. I will be using NPM today. I usually prefer Yarn, and do not ask me why, because I don't really remember anymore why I prefer Yarn. Somebody told me that NPM is actually better now, and I can't really wrap my head around that, and or even follow that discussion. So sometimes I use NPM, sometimes I use Yarn, but on a project basis, right? So if you already started to use Yarn, you use Yarn, that's it. And if you are a NPM fan, you just use NPM. Today I will be using NPM. Right, in terms of databases, I will be using PostgreSQL. I have my own editor. I use VS Code, and perhaps we will be using Postman, but I doubt that we will be hitting Postman today, perhaps in the second part. Postman is a great tool for testing API endpoints, like that. Right. Yeah, I will go over all the details that I cover in the blog post. Let's move it out of the way here. Right. So I created this API demo, perhaps a bit premature. Doesn't really matter. But you need to have Node installed on your computer, and you usually have that. And my Node version is 18.12.1. Okay, thank you. And let's see if there is an npm version 8.19.2. There might be a newer version out there, but it doesn't really matter. In the post, I wanted to go through the setup as quickly as possible, and I asked my readers to set up PostgreSQL. We will not do it in this section right now, because it's not needed for the beginning, for the first part of the demo itself. Again, we will be working outside in, which means that we will be hitting the database later on, further down the line. Doesn't really matter for now. And I already have my IDE set up, and I do not have Postman installed yet on this machine, actually. I don't think so, at least. But since it's optional and we won't be hitting it today, it doesn't really matter for now. Right. So, okay, so in the blog post, I called this folder my RESTful API, and here I call it API demo, but you guys are intelligent enough to see that it's just a semantic difference. Right, I want to create a project, a node project. So I'm gonna say npm init, and I will just pass in the Y flag, which means that I will be answering yes to all the questions that NPM might want to ask me. If you're new to NPM, you might want to go through this if you want to change some settings, but for a very simple demo, we could just do this like this, right? And so a default package JSON has been created for me with very basic settings and no scripts. We can probably delete most of this stuff. We will definitely modify some of it later. Right. So, okay, we need to install some dependencies, and if you look at the post itself, I ask you to install Postgres and SQLize, and something called pghstore, which allows for serializing and deserializing JSON objects in your database, but it's not necessary for part 1. I will install it anyway because that's what we are saying. So we will say npm install, and we will say express. We will be using ExpressJS for this. We can install SQLize, no spelling mistakes, folks, and we will install Postgres and Postgres HStore, and then we will include something called body parser, and body parser is a middleware for Express that can help you parse incoming requests, and it's pretty useful when you work with APIs. And we can do .env, so we can store some parameters in .env files. We should probably also install cores and so, but I don't want to use sorry about that. I don't want to deal with cores across origin resource scripting in this demo yet. Perhaps in the second or third part. For now, let's just install these dependencies into our node modules folder. Now, I know there is whoa, I made a typo. I told you guys not to make a typo, but I made a typo myself. That's interesting. So I need to say HStore. Right. Bummer. Anyway, we will initiate a Git repository here, but there is this git ignore generator that Max, a friend of mine, told me about, but I always forget the URL. Okay, so it was git ignore IO. So what if I just say node? Yeah, so I can generate a git ignore here, and this gives me a pretty comprehensive git ignore, which is good. So I'm just gonna copy this, turn this off, doesn't matter, and I want to initialize a new git repository in my folder. And I know that we do not mention that in the blog post itself, but that goes without saying. You should always have that, right? Now, there's a huge problem with a blank Git repo once you scaffold it in an npm project or potentially many other projects, is that it includes all the files in your folder, and you don't want that, of course, right? So that hence the git ignore. We want to tell Git to ignore certain things, of course, right? So let's just open this up in VS Code, and we will make it full page. All right, so we have our package JSON, and we need a git ignore, right? So we need to create a new file, and it's a hidden file, so hence the dot ignore, right? And we're just gonna paste this in here. And remember, it was gitignore.io. You just tell that online application what sort of project you will be working with, and all of a sudden you have a pretty good gitignore file. I will not go over everything in there. You can definitely remove some of it, but it doesn't hurt to have it. Never mind. Right, so now we only have 3 files to check into our Git repository. So if we do git status, we see that we have the package log and package A. So actually, I'm just going to add them. Git CIAM sets up npm project sets right. Sorry. Okay. Anyhow, now when we have all of this initiated in the post, I go on to a lengthy discussion about the potential benefits of using object relational mappers, ORMs, and SQLize. I leave this to you to read about. Doesn't really matter. But we want to understand the requirements of our little API. So in this demo, we will create something again, this is just a demo. We're going to build a book management system. So before we start building the RESTful APIs, it's essential to understand the requirements and plan the different endpoints and the different resources accordingly. In this tutorial, we will create a simple book management system that allows users to manage authors and their books. Simple, 2 entities. We want to be able to add and update and delete authors, and do the same thing with books. And an author should, I don't know if you mentioned this here, but an author should have, be able to write books. Hence, a book should have an author. Now, in certain situations, a book can have multiple authors. It could be co-written by somebody, right? So we want to take that into account. Not sure I actually mentioned that in the blog post. We'll see about that. Anyway, we will expose several endpoints here. And for those of you guys who are not familiar with HTTP verbs and the so-called CRUD actions in REST APIs, you need to freshen up on that. But basically, you use different types of requests to an API in order to work with your resources, to represent the state of those resources. And usually GET request retrieve data, either a set of data, like many books in this case, or many authors, or an individual book or author. So if you look at, no, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Now, if you look at this endpoint, get API authors, that will retrieve a list of authors. But if you pass in an identifier here, an ID, to the same URL and make the exactly same kind of a request, a GET request in this case, that would retrieve the details of a specific author based on their ID. And what is an ID? Well, of course, when you store something in a database, that will give you that was assign an index number to this particular instance in the database or in the table to retrieve a single resource, right? Now, if you want to create a new author, add something to the database, you want to make a post request using HTTP, and that would add a new author. And then, of course, if you want to modify an author because I don't know, he changed his last name, or you made a typo or whatever, then you have to identify that author, find him or her in the database, or that particular instance in the database, send in new data, and update that particular row. Okay, so for that, you make a put request. And there's another verb, but this is a beginner tutorial. Anyhow, if you want to delete or get rid of an author, you send in a delete request using HTTP. We will cover some of that stuff um, later. And things will, of course, be a little bit more complicated because you have this relationship between authors and books, and you know, you want to retrieve certain data together with a book, and so on. You don't want to make two requests, and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, at this stage in this walkthrough or tutorial or whatever you want to call it, these are the endpoints we want to work with. Right. Okay. But we will be testing our API and test drive this process. And so in this blog post, I go on to give a very brief overview or introduction to testing software in general and APIs in particular. The interesting part for us to focus on is what tools we will be using. And you know, there are many tools out there. My choice of tools, and this could be debated to the end of times if this is a good choice or not, are these ones for this particular purpose, which is, you know, testing APIs. And that would be Mocha, it would be Chai, it would be a mocking library called Signon, and Supertest, which is a small web server-ish kind of thing that can be spun up when you run your tests. So Mocha is a popular test runner. It comes with a set of functionality and assertions, but we will use a different assertion library. That is called Chai. Signon again is a mocking library, and Supertest will help us to make real requests to our testing environment. Right. So yeah, and they need to be installed, of course. So let's do that. Now, these are things that will be used in development mode or development environment only. So if we ever deploy this to our server, to a production environment, we do not need those packages, and therefore we will only install them in development. So we will say, well, actually, we need to do npm install -- save dev, right? We exclude them from production environment, and we will install Mocha, Signon, Chai, right? We want to install Chai subset, and I will talk you through what Chai subset does later on. And we also want to, well, subset is a extension to Chai that can dive deeper into objects and test the structure of a particular object more in detail. Pretty useful, trust me on this one. Right, so we have okay, so we need Signon Chai, which is kind of bridge between Signon and Chai, and also Supertest, of course. Supertest, and hopefully I didn't make any typos. If I did, npm will tell me about it, so that's not a problem. Let's install these things. And we didn't find any vulnerabilities. Thank you very much. We added 117 packages. Wow. Now, in order to see if we can actually use this, we will go into our packages and we will modify our script here to say that we want to use Mocha, and we want to use it recursively, and we want to get out of Dodge once we're done. Otherwise, Mocha will monitor our work, I think. Anyway, this is a very basic setting. There are plenty things we can do to this script, and we probably will. But if I just run npm run test, do I have to say run? I don't know. And there was no tests found because we haven't created any, but we didn't receive an error, which is not bad. What if I just say npm test? Yeah, it's the same thing, so you can omit run. It's been a while since I used npm. Right. Now I want to go into my editor and I want to create a folder that is called test. And in that folder, I want to create a new file, and we want to call it test helpers. Right. And in my blog post, I'm actually using snake case, but I will use camel case for file names here in my demo because I think it's a better practice in JavaScript. I'm a bit influenced by Ruby on Rails development and Ruby development. Yeah. Anyway, let's just do that. Okay, so I want to create a constant that is called chai, and I want to require chai. For that, it's a package that we installed, and so another one is this in the oh, that was wrong. Is the expect keyword, and that would be chai expect, like this. And I will also use sign on chai. I'm just gonna hold on a second here. I need to take a small pause. Right, sorry about the for the small pause. I just had to get away real quickly. So sign on chai, and that would be we need to require sign on chai, of course, and right. We also installed sign on subset. There we go. Right. So here we go. We require that one as well. And then we're just going to configure chai. So we will say chai use we will use the sign on chai, and then consequently we also want to use chai on subset, chai subset, chai subset. Sorry about that. Right, let's format my code so we don't make any mistakes, and we add the semicolons, and we want to export some objects, and that would be the expect. We want to export that one. Right. And it wasn't, well, I made a total. So it's called chai subset, And right, there we go. Sorry about that. Why am I including this twice? I have no clue. Could we just get this done properly? All right. Okay. Right. So the next thing will, of course, be to write an integration test. So in our test folder, I want to create a subfolder again, and then we're going to call it integration. And in that folder we want to create a file, and we want to call it books.spec or test or whatever JS. It's a JavaScript file. I call my tests specs or specifications. You can call it whatever. It's an empty file for now, but I want to run the test command again to see if anything has changed. And it has. As you can clearly see, now Mocha finds a test in the folder that it is looking into recursively. So it means that it looks through all the folders and subfolders and finds a test, but doesn't find anything to do, which means that 0 tests are passing. Okay, so right, we can't do that. We want to import the expect from our test helper, and that would be test. Why are you doing this to me? Oh, because oh really? Come on, give me a break. Test helpers. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, this should definitely. I should see a pop-up here. Actually, I'm very confused why I don't see it. Right, so we require that, and we also want to require supertest from supertest, and then we also want to require app, the application itself, from somewhere. But the question is from where, right? We haven't created that yet. But I will nonetheless, I will say const app equals require and then just say da-da, and we are to app, and we will just say app, right? And this will of course render an error for us. So if we run this now, perhaps it will, perhaps it won't, we'll see. Right, it renders an error saying that cannot find this module app. Okay, so let's create that. We will just create a new file here, and we will call it app.js, and then the only thing we will say const app. It's an empty object for now. It won't be later on that we can module exports. We want to export app, right? Yeah. App like this, and this error should be silent now, hopefully. Right. Okay. It is of course nonsense, right? Because this is the file where we will be setting up our application in our Express application. This is just a workaround. We don't really have that in the blog post, but this is actually something that I might consider adding at some point. But let's go back to our tests. this is the interesting part, of course. So now that we have that installed, we want to create a variable called response, because what we will be doing in this test is to invoke or hit the API endpoint, and then we will take a look at the response from the application and run our assertions against that, right? We want to make sure that the API responds with whatever whatever data or format of data or whatever that we can predict. Okay, so I'm going to say let response, and I will create something called a before block. So I'm going to say before, and see that I have some extensions installed on my VS Code that will generate a little bit of code for me. But what I want to do is to wait for, well, actually I want to set response to whatever super test. Oh, come on. Super test will return to me if I create one and say make a get request to API books, like this, if I want to do this. But in order to be able to do this, we need to make our callback asynchronous here. So with this being run before every other test, we will store whatever this call returns into the response. All right, but before we do that, I made a little bit of a mess. I need to create something called a describe block, and in the describe block I want to make sure that I tell our testing framework and the users or the testers or developers what exactly we're testing, and there are different ways to do that. The best practice that I tend to use is just to say what sort of endpoint we will be using and what sort of request we will be making. So I usually just use this format, get API books, right? And then I will just move all of this inside of this describe block, of course, right? And then I will create, so I have a good setting. None of this will be executed yet. I made a typo, of course. There we go. Right, because we don't have any tests yet. So I will add an it block, which is the actual test, and I will say that if we hit this endpoint with a get request, then it is expected to respond with a 200 status, right? Because if everything works, we should get an HTTP status of 200. That's the, normal state of affairs. Secondly, I will want to write a test that it should return JSON, right? So it is expected, well actually I can remove the word it here, is expected to it is expected to, did we get some sort of a chat here? Thank you, APIs are cool, right. To return or respond with, but return an object with books property, right? So, or key or property. And the last test that I will write is that this particular property actually contains an array, because it's supposed to be a collection of books, so we want to store it in an array. So we will say is expected to return the books property as an array. Right, let's do that. Okay, so we just wrote the overall structure for now, and the next step will be, of course, to write the code for testing this. So so here I can say that we want to expect the response, and that would be status, to equal 200. We want it to be simply 200. That's a matcher. So this entire thing is an assertion, and we are looking at this object and we are matching it to this value. Pretty simple, right? And how do we have this? Well, because it has already been executed in this before block. But this needs to be an asynchronous function, so we need to add that to all of our it blocks. Right. Okay, so the next assertion, we want to expect the response body to have property, and the property is supposed to be called books. And that's a good assertion because we want this API endpoint to return that. And the last one, for now at least, we want to expect this response body books to be an array. There we go. Right, this would be the 4 tests I would like to execute. And I don't know if you guys are following along in this way of thinking, but it's a little bit of a thinking process, like what should I do, what should I return, and that therefore that's the reason why I call this a specification, because these it blocks are specs that are okay, this is supposed to be happening, and this will now guide me in writing implementation code. And if this process, which is of course an evolving thing, and you can approach this iteratively, write a little bit, or you think about this, the things you want to build, and you write specifications for it, then you can of course change your mind, and then you change the specification and so on. But for now, these are the 3 things that want to happen. I want to be able to make an HTTP call, a get request to the specific endpoint. I want it to return a 200 status saying that it works, and then that the answer should have a property called books, and that should be an array. I will execute those tests, right? And they should fail. I need to see it. So let's just do npm test, and we will get an error, of course, because before the all hook is failing for us. And it says that the app.address is not a function. Okay, well, I don't know if that is exactly why this is failing, but it is failing. Mostly, and I can figure it out myself, because nothing is happening in the app.js, of course. So we can't expect it to return anything because it won't help. Now I have a request if I can zoom in into my code, and I can definitely do that. Let's try with this. Well, thank you. Well, I'm live. Yeah. Dreams API. Okay. So anyway, yeah. So let's build this little API, right? So we want to modify this, of course, because shit needs to happen. So I will create a constant, right? And that would be called express because I need to import it, and we will require express for this, and we need to create an app. So we will say const app equals express like this, right? And here we can remove this guy now, of course, right? So we just created an application. Let's see if that changes our error code. You don't have to run those tests over and over again, but I'm a bit curious, All right, we actually changed the message. Boom. We expected a 200 response, but we got a 404, and we all know what a 404 means, right? It's not found. So it's progress, but it's not good progress. Well, it's not enough progress. What I want to do is I don't want to run all of these tests, these 3 tests at all times. So I'm going to actually scope Mocha down a little bit by saying dot only on this it block that checks for the 200 status. And because I don't need to run all 3, I just want to work my way through the first actual test. And I'm going to run this again, and it only executes 1 test. It's still failing, but that's what we want to achieve. We are getting a 404, we are looking for a 200. Okay, so what can we do? Well, it's fairly simple, because we can just say, well, we can say a lot of things, but we want to be able to use JSON responses, right? So we can just tell the application to use express JSON like this, and I want to there are multiple ways of doing this, but I want to set up a router for our application, because we will have multiple routes or endpoints. Now, the test-driven development doctrine tells me that I should be doing the least possible or writing the least possible amount of code in order to make the test pass. And in principle, that's right, and I adhere to those principles. But I mean, theory is theory. Real life is something totally different. So let's not overdo things. Let's make sure that we actually, do the right things. Anyhow, we want to create a router, and well, or what? Let's set up this router. So no, let's create a router, because that's what we do in the in the tutorial, and I should stick to it, of course. So let's create a new file, and we're gonna call it well, not file, sorry. Let's create a folder, and we're gonna call it routes. And in routes, we want to create a new file, and we want to call it books. Yeah, let's do it. Books. Again, nothing in software development is straightforward. There are always multiple ways of doing things, and I wrote this tutorial, but now when I'm coding it again, I can see that there are other things that we could potentially do with it. Anyway, in the router, we want to include express again, and I want to set up a router like this, and then we want to say router dot get, and if we get the the books. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's do that. And then we just gonna do request and response like this, and then we will say just respond. No, res. Sorry, res. With with a status 200. Because that's the only thing we care about at this point. And then we just want to say module exports, and we want to export the router, right, like this. Yeah, okie dokie. And then we want to go into the app.js, and we want to import this books routes. So we're gonna say const we're just gonna call it books routes, and that would be require is this correct actually? Routes books, right. And we will just tell this little guy that we want to use for API books the books routes like this. Oh, misspelled that. That is the beautiful thing about software. You can always improve it as you think or learn about new stuff. Definitely. That's a very good insight. Right. So, yeah. We are telling this application that if somebody hits this API books, then we will look into books routes, and in the book routes we're just looking at responding with this with a 200 status if that is being hit. Now I deviate a little bit from the tutorial. I will send a link. I will do it. There are multiple ways, again, as I said, to do things. But let's test this. And we got a problem. Cannot read of undefined reading yet. Really. So let's just change this to books. Am I getting the same error? What did I do wrong here? No. So the problem with this runner is that, right, we are getting an error. So the error messages are really hard to read in Mocha, in my opinion, but you get used to it. Usually the answer to your problem is in the top of the response, even though the response is quite big. So on line 4 in books.js, I have a problem because I made an error because I don't know. Yeah, because it's not called router like this. It is called router like this, and it's also a function. And I should have known that, and I don't know why I made this mistake, because I did. Somebody said at some point, I usually say this analogy that writing software is like writing a book. You know, you tell a story with software, and I believe that. I think that's creating software is a creative, you know, working with software is a creative endeavor, and you can express yourself with code. However, there is one very big distinction, that if you misspell something, use a small r instead of a capital R, or you don't include some parentheses or misplace a comma or semicolon or whatever, you know, if you're a book writer, the book doesn't stop working, whereas software can just literally explode in your face and make you look like an idiot. So that's exactly what happened here. I was in too much of a hurry, and I didn't include the right reference to a right module. Let's see if we can run this test again. and we should be not okay. We get a timeout error. Yeah, ensure that done is called. Yeah, we need to ensure that done is called, but also do I have to include an after hook? Really? I don't think so. Do I have to include an after hook? Or am I missing something? This is an async function. Do I have to say await here? I don't think I need to do that, but well, I shouldn't be getting this error. Yeah, no, that wasn't that. Let's do an after hook. Async. Should I have to just say done? Ah, come on. Done is not defined, so that will not. Haba. What? Ensure done is called. First thing test and hooks. Right. Because we're not getting this. Interesting. No, that's not it. Done is not defined. No, exactly. So, okay. Right. Right. Interesting. Why am I getting this? So mocha done. In before or not? Promise. As the promise resolve. So do I have to do done here in each test? Are you shitting me? Yeah. Right. But that is not defined. Why would I function done? Okay, so if I just do this and then I say done like this and then we comment out this after, would that do anything for me? Apparently not. So is that something I need to do? And now I don't know if this will help me or not. It's a bit of a mess. Wow. It's explicit, right. For us, so okay, so just to be on the clear side, let's just copy this code, comment it out, the entire block, and set this here. This is an async function. We should do. Could be that npm test. We're still getting an error. Right. I am calling down, but all right. Let's try another thing. Let's do this. No, sorry. Let's remove this. Let's get rid of this. Let's reinstate this. Let's comment this out. We don't want to do this. And let's test this and we get the same error again. Okay, so interesting. And so this is actually a big problem because I didn't take that into account when I was writing my um, my walkthrough, and this could be a big problem. So anyway, this needs to be a nothing function. I know that. Expect right. Should I wait for this? No. I will check a little bit of my old code. So if I go to my own GitHub, and I know that I worked with API tests a while back, so let's see if we can find Node API. Do we have anything like this? Right. Notebooks. Right. Let's see. And if we go to specs, and we go to request specs, server app listen. Right. After done. Super test. Okay. I understand. So we could create a server, and then we can listen for the server, and it does it. Yeah, because it's not right. It's not enough that we are passing this in. This is right. So let's. You know what? I'm going to be a bit lazy, and we're just going to copy this code. So let's server. So we create both server and request, right? And we have this. All right. And then here in the before block, we create the server by listening to the app. That's a listen is and also, yeah, we didn't set this up properly. Oh, there's a totally different thing we need to do. Right. Yeah, because we never start the application. Damn it. That's a fucking shit show, people. Uh, we need to say app listen on port 3000. Yeah, but it won't solve a problem. But I'm a moron. Yeah, uh, can we just say node app JS? Let's see if this actually starts. All right, so localhost 3000. Do we have anything? And then we say API books. It doesn't listen for anything. It doesn't return anything. Oh my god, what a fucking moron I am. Anyway, let's just finish this off in this spec here, in the before block. We just want to do this, and then there's this after. We're just gonna change that. There we go. Okay. So we're just gonna stop this, and we just, for the sake of, you know, making this a bit faster. Oh damn it. We're just gonna go to this app.js, and yeah, well, the parser could. App Express, right. Don't I have to listen for this? Okay, so I should app use, right. Oh gosh, Express JS start listen start at specific port. Right. different routes. I don't want to use API reference. Start express route application console of the app title app use admin. Yeah. Listen, yeah, you should say listen, but on 3000, right? Yeah. So yeah, you should listen for 3000. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Um, books res, and then we say JSON hello, you know, a message hello world. Hello. Okay. So again, can we just okay, no, that doesn't matter. Let's just do, oh, come on. Let's just do 3000 and then we just start this application. Can we please go on and do that? Right? And then localhost 3000, and it just doesn't do anything for us. Why not? Okay, so if I do API books, what the fuck? Right, with a one route. Okay, let's have a look. What am I doing wrong? First of all, let's debug this in a very, very crude and simple way. Let's stop this and let's just add a callback here. Console log listening on 3000. Right. There we go. So app listening 3000. Right. So if we start this baby now, listening on 3000. Okay, so that actually started the server. Well, at least we think it did. So let's just go to this books.js there, and we just, instead of say, we just say send, we just want to send hello as a text string for now. Regress, this looks good. This doesn't contain any errors, in my opinion. And this guy is just waiting for what? What are you waiting for? Okay, so in the app.js, I just books require routes. Express use express JSON. Right, it doesn't matter. Oh gosh, what did I do wrong here? Forget about this routes. Okay, let's just get rid of this for now, and because I need to pinpoint, so let's just do app.get and just, you know, whatever route, and that would be request and response, and we just say we're just gonna say res send hi there. So we're just gonna copy this. Anyway, just response. Yeah, right. So we're just gonna stop the server, start the server again. We're gonna go to localhost 3000, whatever. Res is not defined. What do you mean res is not defined? Not router. Well, JS. Res. Okay. Sorry. Right. So, and again, we're not using nodemon, so we need to stop this. Start it again. Okay, so this worked. Either worked. Okay. So, all right. So, you know, you probably get tired of me debugging this very simple thing, but I made a boo-boo somewhere. I want to say npm install save dev nodemon. Well, a nodemon is a monitor. Oh, come on. It's a monitor for node applications, which means that I don't have to restart my server over and over again, and I will just go into my package JSON, and I want to add a new script, and I will say nodemon app.js. Right, and now I can do npm start, and now we're watching this guy, and this one works, right? So now every time I change something, I don't have to restart my server. Very, very handy, especially when you do this kind of weird stuff, debugging, simple things. App.js. Okay, so let's open up this again. I will get rid of this later, but we are including the routes, and so if I now do API books, now he says hello. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. So I can get rid of this because I don't need it anymore, and I want to go into the books, and I want to say, can I say JSON? Can I send JSON like this? And change this to a JSON object, and I will say message. Right. Let's format this. Right, and then reload. And now it returns. So I don't even know what I fixed now. All of a sudden it fucking works. Okay. Yeah, that sucks big time. And as you can, if you see the terminal output, you can see all the error messages and so on, you know, marked in reddish. And then if anything is green, right? Okay, so let's see if we can do npm test again and see what's up. Resolution method is overspecified. What? Next problem. Well, it's a new error message. I hope I still have you guys with me. Right. So we have this server. Right. And what is it saying? Resolution method is overspecified. So what if this is not a... No. What? After. Right. Huh. Let's take a look at what we had here. In specs, in request specs, and books endpoint. Right. So and this is not so okay, so these doesn't have to be asynchronous. Okay, but of the factory clean. So here we're using some factories and some mocking of objects. But what could I? So before, right? So this is the problem, right? Is this the problem? I think this is the problem. That the before block was asynchronous. Okay. We get that fixed, and now we are getting a problem that we cannot read the properties of undefined reading status. Okay, thank you for that. Request. Yeah, because we are not defining the response anywhere. Duh. And so how did I do that here? Oh, okay. Of course. Of course. Before we need, yeah. So request is set, but not the right, not the response, right? So we want to hit this before. Okay, so we need a before and a before each block. Okay, shit, that's what a mess I created. Okay, so the before is like the arrangement of setting up the objects that we will be using, and then before each actual test it block. So we could easily move this out of the describe. This is part of this test setup. Now it all comes back to me, and I've been doing this for a long time, but not have done it in a long time either. That makes sense. Right. Okay, so now we actually get the response, and this should now return to 100 status. But we got a 404. Why? Oh, because oh God, again. So again, hard learned lesson, and I'm doing this in the open, transparent with you, few viewers that I have on YouTube and Twitch. Um, Never copy and paste code, because you will just get into a fucking shit show for yourself and make a fool of yourself. I just, it's ridiculous, but it is what it is. Let's have a go. Yeah, it's expected to respond with 200 response. All right. Whew. Okay. So let's remove this restriction of only running this block of code and run all of the three, and we should get one passing and two failing. Yes, we got that because it has no property books and it is not an array. That's a quick fix. We're going to hard code this. It will not be hello, but rather books, and it should be an array. And we will run this test again, and we are in the green. Git status. Right. So we added a few folders and a few files, and I will make a commit. Git status. Git status. We have all of them, and git CIAM cleans up mess in post and adds basic tests. Guys, I will wrap this up. I've been at it for a little longer than I was hoping or expecting. to do the books and point. Thank you for your questions and comments, Dreams API. I will return soonish and finish this up. I will definitely update my instructions and republish them. And yeah, a very crude introduction or demo on how you can write small tests and develop an API. And you got a little bit of debugging hunt view on how I work when I encounter errors. Hopefully you learned something. I don't know, I had fun. I love to code, and it's Saturday morning, and I will be heading out with my family, and I see you guys later. Thank you very much. Cheerio.